Hello Seekers! After a long while, I finally made a deck building for Liena. You guys have been playing with her for a while already, but I've seen many of you struggling between the right balance between spells and creatures, and even wondering which creatures should I use to get the most out of her legacy. Join me on this video and let's find out together the best way to play with the laziest Seeker in Malediction. Let's start off with Karma Mock, the one they think that it is the Seeker, right? Karma Mock has only 2 accuracy, which is very little for a melee Seeker, although it deals 6/4 damage. So even on a graze, it does a considerable amount of damage. It has a standard movement, low defense, especially for melee Seekers, and only 14 health. At first glance, it's not very much appealing. It can die quite easily. That is, if we don't read the other abilities. Shielded 2 states that while it's refreshed, it takes 2 fewer damage from any sources. Alright, but that's only while refreshed. So to play the Seeker, you have to calculate quite well your movements or your activations, especially or ideally to last Karma Mock activates last. So you can protect it more, suffers less damage, and then you activate to take the most advantage from Mystic Reverberation. Mystic Reverberation allows you to copy any spell targeting Karma Mock for another unit within 6 inches. So it's another unit, not another ally. One of the uses that I like to make is target my Karma Mock with Telekinesis, for example, to make it closer to an enemy, and then target another enemy with Telekinesis so it can be on a better position for me. Disengaging from a dying ally, or maybe positioning it close to another ally so I can hit it twice, or maybe just to detach it from a unit with protection or something like that. So Mystic Reverberation, you have to know when to use it, because once you can use it, Karma Mock is going to be vulnerable. On 12 defense and 14 health, it can die very fast. Another thing important to note is that Shielded stacks with resistance. So for example, if you have the relic that gives resistance, you will reduce 3 damage whenever your Seeker is attacked. Since we have 6/4 damage, you already know that Liena, I won't say Karma Mock anymore, you already know that Liena is a glass cannon. You can quite easily make 4 or 5 attacks during your activation if you combine spells and do a lot of damage to an enemy. But the only thing is, be careful, because once you do that, you have to make sure that you don't have that many enemies targeting your Seeker, or else it's most likely going to die. But since we have access to both Primal and Conclave, we do have access to lots of shenanigans, lots of spells that allows us to manipulate well the battlefield, and of course we also have the Legacy. The Legacy has 2 abilities. The first one basically allows you to cast an extra spell, can be a channel, can be a swift, doesn't matter. Even if you have already cast a channel this activation, if you kill something, you can cast another channel with spending 2 fewer echo. And note that this is once per activation. So if by any means you kill something on an enemy activation, you can cast a channel, for example, on an enemy's activation with 2 fewer echo. So this is better used if you have, for example, Retribution, if you have Arcane Mirroring, that are swift spells that allows you to do damage on an enemy. But it can also work if you are using, for example, the Raptor, who has Direct 3, but note that it says whenever you defeat an enemy. So if, for example, the enemy is standing on the Noxious Flesh Garden and dies due to the terrain damage, you are not the one who killed it, so you cannot spend the extra spell. Duly noted? Great. And then we have the second ability, which is much more simpler, but as strong, that says that every non-Seeker allies you own, meaning every other creature, has Spell Strike 1. If it already has Spell Strike, increase it by 1. Which is great, because basically you increase the damage of every single creature we have on our deck every time we spend a spell. You already know that the Spell Strike doesn't scale, so if I play 2 spells, it will not accumulate the damage from Spell Strike. So the main things I would like you guys to remember is that we have to protect our Seeker before we can set up the battlefield and then use it as a glass cannon to do a lot of damage. And after we activate it, rely on spells such as Die Hard or any other to prevent it from dying and abuse for Mystic Reverberation. Every time we kill something, we can cast an extra spell, can be either Swift or Channel, doesn't matter, spending 2 Fear Echo, so this allows us to make some combos with our spells. Example, I can do, for example, Trample Through to move with my unit, deal damage, make one attack with Spell Strike, because I have already spent a spell, kill something, maybe not, but let's say 2 strikes to kill something, and then I can use another spell with 2 Fear Echo to, I don't know, do more damage, to reposition myself, anything I need basically. So this deck relies on a lot of spells in hand and relevant spells to position or to make a difference on the battlefield. All of this while increasing the damage thanks to Spell Strike. Well, you got the idea, so let's see how we build this deck. As usual, let's start with the basic units. Well, over here we have them all, and for the deck I'm focusing at this time on choosing units that I can get the most out of the damage output they can bring me. So for instance, I'm not going to use any Spirit Shamans because they only have 1 accuracy, and as much as I like Battle Cry, I do not intend to use it very much on this specific build. I have another build for Liena, which in fact is my favorite one, that I use the Shamans to Battle Cry the sentries. And well, although it's my favorite, I cannot say that's the most optimized or a build that I suggest you guys to use, because it has several weaknesses and we would have to make a whole different video just for me to show how to use it. So for now, let's stick with the basics. A good Liena goes for good melee units and some ranged support. So I'm going to use the Tarok Beasts, of course, because they are one of the best basic units in the game, due to its low cost, only 2 echo, and overall good status, because he doesn't need much to deal 4/2 damage thanks to Swarm, and if you manage to give it Spell Strike as well, we are looking for a 2 cost unit that's going to hit 5/3, pretty much the same as many Seekers out there. Although it only has 2 accuracy, it's worth the 2 echo by a long while. So we are going to use the Tarok Beasts and the Paxos Gorehorn, because we are going to have, hopefully, some ways to deal with the Frenzied. I don't like to have many of them on the battlefield because usually I like to pick my fights, in the sense that I like to choose which units I'm going to activate first and what they are going to do in an overall basis. But we cannot pass on Paxos because he has a huge damage, huge accuracy for its only 3 cost, and 12 health is something that can help him survive 2 attacks in a single activation, so it's very worth it. We are not going to use 3 of any of these guys, we are going to use 2 of each one, so 2 Paxos and 2 Tarok Beasts for our army, and we are going, in fact, to use 2 Primal Totem. I don't usually use Primal Totem on my Primal decks, but in here it has 3 important roles. It prays, so we definitely need those 3 echo for each round, and 1 pray is going to pay the Primal Totem for the game, so we are going to have 1 extra activation because of the unit, with Inspire 1, which is very helpful since we are going to be landing strong strikes, we might as well hit with them. And secondly, it has Rally, which allows me to guarantee advanced reinforcement, which is quite important, and if our opponent spends his activation killing the totem, it's a win as well. And the third important thing is to block Paxos Gorehorn line of sight. If I activate him and he doesn't have line of sight, he does not need to charge. So I can use the Primal Totem as a deploy to block Gorehorn's sight and allow me to choose what I want to do with him. So that's a major hole in this deck because, as I said, I like to choose what my units do, right? So Pray, Inspire, Rally, and blocking line of sight, all these abilities are very much worth the 2 echo I'm going to spend for Primal Totem. And that's all for our basic units. I have to make an honorable mention, like I did with the Spirit Shaman, for the Uncaged Experiment. It's a funny looking unit, but I don't really like it. Single-minded makes it being unable to charge or shift, so you can only move or attack with it. Okay, you can do that 3 times. I have seen some games in which this encouraged experiment had, for example, a lightning scepter and made 3 strikes against several units. That's useful, that's cool to do. But as a default strategy, I don't really like this guy. I'd rather use Gory Horn, Tarok Beast, or whatever instead of him. And the Arcane Sentinel, like I said, my favorite build uses it, but this one I'm not going to include it. It is a very worth unit for its damage, accuracy, and cost, but to be able to play with a unit that doesn't move, especially one that you really want to have more than one on the battlefield, I cannot say that's a standard deck. So I would advise you guys to play with it carefully, because let's face it, it's easy to play around it. I have another video, and if you guys really want, I can make a video for the other deck as well, in which my whole strategy goes around using Arcane Sentinel. And I gotta say, it's a great deck to play. Much harder than this one I'm presenting you guys, but quite fun as well. So moving on to the elite units, we are going to use both copies of Virtual Battlecaster because it is simply the strongest unit for this deck. Already has a Spell Strike, so if you cast something, you will hit for 6/4 with elite unit, which is great, and it has spell power. My favorite play with him is to use, spoiler alert, Trample Through, because that guy also has Empower Spell, so you do 4 damage for the shift you are using, and then you make 3 strikes with 6/4. It's a great interaction, it allows you to move without provoke retaliation, and you make 2 big strikes against your guy. So 2 copies for Virtual Battlecaster. We use 2 copies for Moment Weaver, basically for 3 reasons. It has a decent range, good damage, and battlefield control. Sometimes, and I mean several times, we need to detach that unit with protection or that unit we want to kill from the group, right? So knockback and pull are 2 great abilities to have to allow us to manipulate the battlefield better. Since it already has a good accuracy, with that damage and Spell Strike makes it a very valuable unit if you manage to protect it. 10 health is not that much, so do not reinforce this unit too forward on the battlefield. And for elite ones, we are going to use only these 2 guys. You could make a Liena more focus on spell damage, and then you would use, for example, Woodcaster Shaman, but it's not that case for this deck. Like I always say, you can build the same Seeker in several different ways. You wanna make a Liena focus on blasting guys? You can, just grab the spell power ones and be happy, it's going to work. Which reminds me, I forgot to talk about these guys over here. The Artillerist is also strong on this sense that it already has spell strikes, so it's a basic unit, hitting for 5/3 if you cast something, but for the same cost, I'd rather have the Tarok Beast that does the same damage but has more health and more mobility. So that's why. Conclave Scholar, it's not that bad, but it's on the other hand, right? It has spell power, not spell strike. So for the build that you are going to be blasting stuff, use it. But for this one, I'm gonna pass on him. And we move to the unique units. We are going to use Spellbound Devourer, because this guy is our more reliable source of echo. Essence by the 3 with a deck full of mobility in which you already have melee expert to deal 7/5 damage per attack. That's no way you pass on this guy for this deck. So Essence Biter grants you echo for each kill you make during this unit's activation. Can be through spells or any other means. So we need this guy to help us being able to cast and deploy everything we need. We also are going to use Gateway Guardian because yes, it is a very strong unit, it has everything we want, already has spell immunity, so if we want to cast something, some area damage, or if we want to use him to protect Liena, because let's face it, after it gets exhausted, we just pray for it to be alive. Gateway Guardian helps us to protect her more often. We are also going to use Sektakar. It's our main ranged unit, can do a great area damage, especially good against swarm decks. And it already has pinpoint, so it helps a lot to choose who is the main target for our attack. Again, with Spell Strike, 6/4 damage in a ranged attack, it's great. Note that the Spell Strike does not work for bombardment damage, so do not try to add it to the splash. And yes, we are going to use Moktovar. The main problem with this unit, at least what most people say, is that it's very hard for you to manage to make 2 strikes to try to render an opponent. In this deck, we are going to have several extra attacks spells and some mobility spells as well. With Liena on the battlefield, it's quite easy for us to manage to make 2 units move, so it's more likely for us to manage to make 2 or even 3 strikes with Muktavar. That's why we are going to use it. And as you counted, I am using 4 unique cards. That's the number I usually go around because I do not want to use all of them, but I want to have at least 1 or 2 of them to bid for initiative and win the bid when I need it. So we are going to use Muktavar and Spellbound Devourer as a main source of melee damage, Gateway Guardian as a complementary source of melee damage but mostly for protection, and Sektakar to be our main ranged damage, right? I'm not going to use Neriev on this deck because I'm not focused on Spellbounds, and I don't like Neriev's stats for a more battle-oriented deck like this one. Spell-wise, we are, of course, gonna bring all the Adrenaline Rush because it's our main extra attack spells, and of 2 Liaison Stride. 2 and not 3, we don't need that much movement, but mostly because I ran out of slots when I was building this deck. I wish I could use all 3 of them, but there are several spells I want to use and I cannot use all of them. Speaking of spells that I cannot use, or at least that I won't use right now due to slot shortage, I have to talk about Heartstab Blast. In this deck, Heartstab Blast is awesome. 2 Echo for you to manage to possibly do 6 damage to several units is just too good. 6 damage because it will trigger on Liena and another unit that's nearby, so you can damage the same unit more than once. But I don't have many units with Empower spell. I will not have many spells that deal damage, and I rather use my spell slots for other effects like extra attacks, because over here I could do, for example, 6 damage to 3 units, let's say. But if I manage to make 2 strikes with other units, I can possibly have the same damage output but with extra effects, such as Essence Binder, such as Knockback, Pull, Rend, and other things that we could use. So I made a decision to prioritize extra attacks or extra actions instead of raw damage. That's the reason also that I'm not going to use any of the damage dealing spells, nor any other base ones. I'm going to stick only with Adrenaline Rush and Liaison Strike. Alright, moving on, we have a bunch of elite spells. All great spells. I wish I could play like Magic the Gathering Commander deck because I want to use all of them, but that's not the case, so we have choices to make, and that's what I'm here for. I'm going to use only 1 Neutralizing Ward because, after all, it is a Conclave deck, and sometimes you have to put your opponent on its due place and show who is in charge, right? So 1 Neutralizing Ward, 2 Telekinesis, because Battlefield Control is the name of the game. You have to manage to bring enemies closer or to move your units away or any other combination of those things by your spells, and as many spells we can cast is better for us to trigger Spell Strike. So 2 Telekinesis, 2 Trial of Stone. It's a low cost extra attack unit. If you kill the unit on your first attack, it will not retaliate, so you will draw the card and not take the enemy damage. So Trial of Stone is awesome as an extra attack source. And as I mentioned, Trample Through is one of my favorite spells for this deck because it does 3 things we want: movement, damage, and trigger Spell Strike. I'm not, unfortunately, using Arcane Mirroring for a very specific reason. I rather choose when I'm going to have the extra actions. And note that although it says 1 AP, I can mimic any 1 AP action, there are not that many 1 AP actions that I would like to clone from my opponents, and I cannot use to clone my own. It has to be an enemy doing the action. So mostly we use it for extra movement or extra attack. And in this sense, I rather have the Azure Stride and Adrenaline Rush because I can take most out of my Spell Strike. If I use this card to make one extra attack, for example, I will make one attack with Spell Strike. If I use Adrenaline Rush, I will most likely do at least 2 attacks. So I take more advantage from my legacy, and I'd rather have the other ones instead of Arcane Mirroring. And down here, I also use one Die Hard, just one copy, because, well, sometimes Liena needs it. I usually like to use one copy of Retribution as well, you know, for that specific smite Sigif is going to give you, or that Thunderous Devastation that a Thunderstep just used. But for this time, I'm not going to manage to put a Retribution on this deck because we don't have slots for it. Okay, so 1 Die Hard, 2 Trample Through, no Arcane Mirroring, 2 Telekinesis, and 1 Neutralizing Ward. That's our elite spells. Don't worry, we are going to review the whole deck in just a minute. And we move to our uniques. As I have mentioned it several times already, this is a kind of control and movement focused deck, right? But I'm not going to use Endless Transposition because it is a unique spell and I cannot use it with Liena's Legacy, only basic and elite spells. So although I love to change positions, I can just use a Telekinesis or the Azure Stride or something like that to have almost the same effect. And since we don't have slots for everything, I'm going to use the Manifest because, well, every Conclave deck, no matter what, has to have the Manifest. Runefold Ward is the only way we can really stop Swift spells, and there are some Swift spells we don't want to be resolved. I'm going to use as my only source of damage spells Cataclysmic Blast for a few reasons actually. It's a lot of damage for 4 echo, can hit multiple units, and I can cast it for lower cost through the Legacy. The Legacy says that we can cast another spell even though if you have already cast a channel, for example the Azure Stride or Adrenaline Rush to make several attacks, and you kill something, you can cast Cataclysmic Blast at lower cost. So the main thing to do with this is actually to cast Cataclysmic Blast, do damage to, I don't know, 2-3 units, and then you activate Sectacar and do damage to all of those units as well through Bombardment. It's a lot of area damage if the opponent doesn't counter it, even if it is, I don't know, order deck with lots of protection, he is going to spend a lot of resources to prevent somebody from dying. So I like this as my main area damage, let's say, and also Reputation. Allows me to search for whatever I need and have a backup plan just for one spell. It is quite useful in such a heavy spell deck as this one, so we are going to use this as well. Reputation, Cataclysmic Blast, Runefold Ward, and the Manifest are our 4 unique spells. So this is how our deck looks like. We have 17 spells, mostly focused on moving things around and extra actions. The only exceptions are the 2 counters, Reputation to tutor whatever we need, Die Hard to protect Liena, and the Manifest to, well, you know what the Manifest is for. So we have 5 extra attacks, 6 extra movements, the Azure Stride with Shift and Telekinesis, right? And all the shenanigans, and 14 units, mostly the ones that we can easily drop, like Tarak Beast and Paxos Gorehorn, so we can drop them earlier, and then put the Primal Totem as a reinforcement to pray and help us have extra activations to better set up our battlefield and advanced reinforcement. And the other guys are the ones that are going to do the kills. Actually, everybody here is able to do a lot of killing because every single unit of this deck can do it 5 damage with a single strike, either by extra spell strike or by the full damage. So we are looking for heavy hitters with extra actions on this deck. That's what makes Liena quite dangerous. And of course we are using Starcast Hall because we have a lot of channel spells. And as for side deck, I placed the Reckless Researcher because it helps us to prevent the activation of several units. So this is more for aggressive decks. We can use one of our activation to deal some damage and prevent him, the opponent, from activating. Farsight Ambusher because it can also reach the 5 damage threshold with Spell Strike and Ambush. He's a far attacker, so we can use him for decks like Londriel and Sigriff that are more focused on retaliation for melee attacks and these kind of things. And Shifty Wings for ranged decks like Bolionor and Ambusher's Position because, well, there can be times like against Morda or some versions of Ingor that they swarm the battlefield with useless units, so you can make sure to bring the important one to the front. But as a side deck. Well, talking about relics, the main thing here is that Liena already does a lot of damage. So we can either amplify that or we can compensate her weakness. But we should go to the extreme sides. We do not want to be in the middle there and do neither of those things well. So if we want to focus on her damage dealing side, we want to use the Boots of Celerity, because this allows us to better positioning, to help her to move around and make sure she is going to make both strikes. We also can use Reaper's Edge, because with this her strikes are going to hit for 8/6 damage, so even on a graze we can do a lot of damage, and it also gives us Essence Binder. We do need this extra echo, and we can use this echo, the gain from the kill, to cast the extra spell the Legacy allows us to. So I really like Reaper's Edge with her, as long as we can coordinate well her activation to take the most out of it. I do not like to use Fangs of the Demon with her, because we struggle a lot to prevent her from taking damage, and dealing 3 damage to a Seeker that has only 2 accuracy is not my best choice, so I don't recommend this one. The Reliquary is a wild card, right? If it's the last pick for the Relic, for any Seeker, you should get Everkeep Reliquary, because it gives us the accuracy, it gives us the defense, and if we need something else, we can trade this at any time during the action phase. So you can take advantage out of the accuracy bonus, for example, make the strike, after the hit is declared, we swap for Reaper's Edge, for example, to do extra damage. So the Reliquary is always a good choice, pretty much the same as the Boots. It's never bad for any Seeker to have them. But thinking about the top 5 choices for Liena, I would complete the selection with Everlasting Heart, because like I said, we want Liena to survive. Extra 5 health and regeneration can be a huge plus for this, and she already does a lot of damage by herself. She doesn't need the relic to help her with that. And also the Helm of Wrath, because resistance to stacks with shielded, so if she is in Berserk, she will prevent 4 damage from any sources. Basically, she will survive to anything your opponents do to her, and once she activates, once again, she hits for 8/6 damage. So basically, you just have to manage to activate her after your opponent's main threat, for example. Helm of Wrath is great for Liena as well, and this would be my top 5 relics for her. You can say, for example, that Vengeance and Retribution is also great, because she will make a huge strike against anyone. And I don't disagree, but I rather Liena not to be in target of the attacks, as much as I can prevent it. If she's going to be hit, I rather her to have more life or to take less damage instead of Retribution, as a default choice. Of course, you are dealing with a Swarm deck for your opponent, Vengeance and Retribution might be a better call, because once you kill the unit, the Legacy triggers and you can spend a channel or Swift spell with paying 2 fewer echo. It's also great, but as a default, if we are not dealing with specific swarm decks, I'd rather choose the other relics. So feel free to choose anything you think, but my recommendations will still be one of these 5 relics over here. So I hope this video has helped you to understand a little bit more on how Liena is going to work, protect her or at least activate her last, and to set up for when you play with Liena, you can take the best usage of Mystic Reverberation, not only when you play her, but once you play her, because you can activate your units after and still benefit from it. But be aware that you must protect her, because she is quite easy to kill and your opponents will likely aim for her because she does a lot of damage and has low health and defense. But overall, that's a very straightforward deck as well. You just have to understand that you will not go on a steady pace after your enemies. You are going to be spending some time making the setup and then make great bursts of damage for each activation. Well, that's pretty much the basics on Liena. I hope you have enjoyed. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe the channel if you haven't, and please share this content with your friends and help me spread the word about the malediction.